So, Jake, how are you, man?
All right. Yeah,
Ha-
I really can't complain.
Good.
I've
How's
I've been
life?
moaning about the weather for a while, and now we finally got it, and it's too hot.
I know, but I'm not saying a fucking word.
Yeah. I've learnt my lesson
Just
here.
yeah. I know we spent all of the first half of June, end of May. Like, when is it going to get warm? Because it's pissing cold. Yeah, it's shit.
Absolutely. But hey, we're here,
We're
and
here. It's something. Yeah, we wouldn't be English if we weren't complaining about the weather in some respect.
it's in our blood.
Yeah. So what's going on? How's life?
Life is good. I've been quite busy doing my sort of what I would call my day job, which
Mm,
is not really a day job, but it's playing other people's music in areas where I largely can't be seen.
yeah.
Um, so I do several West End shows. Uh, Tonight I'll be doing Moulin Rouge.
Okay.
Tomorrow I'll be doing Book of Mormon. Every now and then I do a Hamilton, and I've got like a kind of a, a sort of part-time-ish position on a show called Aber Voyage,
Oh yeah.
which is kind of fun. That one is like on stage and can be seen. So between doing all those things, I tend to fill up the diary with kind of events that I already know how to do to a degree,
Mm,
and don't need to spend too much time sort of prepping for them. Don't need to carry my guitars anywhere,
yeah.
and which in theory leaves me open to do my projects at home.
Yeah. But
Yeah. In theory, sometimes rest is important, I suppose.
I mean, yeah, it is. It is. So, how did you get into musical theatre, West End shows? How long have you
Oh,
been doing that?
um, well, I mean, again, that's this is kind of the day job. It's it's just regular work, and
Mm,
it came from basically being able to read music to a degree.
yeah.
You don't need to be a perfect sight reader to be able to get into the musical theatre world as a guitarist, because very few guitarists are fluent readers. And after sort of finding my way into some like Amdram stuff when I was a bit younger, and then into like a professional gig on a panto,
Yeah.
and you just kind of develop a sort of portfolio that means that you can be trusted
Mm,
to navigate a show. Maybe your listeners don't know this, but when you dep on a show, you essentially don't have any rehearsal. You just have to go in and play the show.
yeah.
You'll have the materials you need to prepare for it, um, and so they kind of don't let just anyone have a pop.
Mm,
You often really have to have some kind of history in that field,
yeah.
and I think that's the thing. It's like it's quite an attractive job, but not a lot of people go into this area going, "I want to be a musical theatre
Mm,
guitarist." I mean,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
certainly didn't, and so they might pass on the opportunity to become good readers, to get experience in the theatre world, to know how the hierarchy works,
Yeah.
and all that kind of thing. So it's just something I kind of fell into, and then became like the sort of main source of income, if you like. But
Mm,
before that, obviously the sort of artistic projects that I do under my own name, like for example the album I made in 2020, the numerous JTC products, and you know I've got a book out on Amazon now, and
nice.
it's all that sort of thing is kind of like the stuff that people often associate with my name, because I don't really post
Mm,
online about the theatre stuff I do as much,
okay.
because I just think, well, once you've done one, what am I meant to do this every day?
Yeah.
You know, it's,
Here
that
again.
would be very
Yeah.
boring, right? So you try to say, well, this is actually something that I own. This is something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Occasionally, there'll be like a sort of specific reason for making a post, but
Mm,
yeah, it's a general sort of freelance musician, and you know, you it you might in the olden days call it like the sort of session world.
hmm.
Apart from there are very few sessions.
Yeah.
So when people say, "Oh, I'm like a session musician," I think that just sort of comes to mean you make a living uh, being paid to play kind of any kind of music that someone puts in front of you,
Sure.
outside of a context where you can be seen on stage or something. You know, so it's a slightly different definition, but I hear that's what people are using nowadays to describe that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I don't know how many sessions you do, but I do a handful a year, if that. And I think it's yeah. I mean, I was speaking to Stuart Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was speaking to. It was yesterday. I spoke to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I knew people in the '80s that you do 3 sessions a day. You do."
Mm-hmm. It was a different world, and all those guys.
Kylie, then go off and do something else, and then
all those guys became theatre musicians when the studios started to close up shop.
Yeah. And so you mentioned like doing theatre work and being a reader. Was there anything that drew you towards reading? Was it a teacher, or was it something that you just sort of wanted to do off your own back?
In order to play jazz, which is something I got really interested in my sort of late teens, you have to be able to kind of be at least literate in chords and be able to get through a melody without having the tab.
Yeah.
I was also a bit weird in that my kind of interest was music rather than guitar playing, and composition and all sorts of things like that. So just general music literacy was just something I felt like I should be, onto. And it's such a brilliant thing to be able to do, because it just opens up an entire, library of things that you can look at. Some of the greatest, pieces of music in the world are free and easily accessible on online, and you can just go and, read it. And it's amazing. It's a real shame if people can't do that. But then again, if you're not motivated by those kinds of things, don't feel bad that you're not interested in doing it. I think it's that thing of like, you can only really make yourself do something that you're interested in to the level at which it's useful to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what? The energy you need behind trying to get anything to a decent level has to come from somewhere really genuine, or otherwise you just don't do those things properly. If you feel like you're doing something because you should, well, I mean, speaking for myself, I've just never been that kind of guy. Oh, I really should learn a few bluegrass licks. Yeah. I'm just not interested. Yeah. So I won't. And then the one day that comes up where I've got to have some bluegrass chops down, and I don't have it down as much as the next guy, big deal. That's an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
We only have so many hours in the day, and I mean, that's where diversity in our field becomes important. Is that you've got different specialists, you've got different all-rounders.
Yeah.
And that's really all we can do. But I guess logically, I would say, go and learn how to read music. It's great. It opens up all sorts of doors and has a kind of exponential chain of promises that can help you. But you'll never get the energy to be disciplined and rigorous in learning how to do that unless you already know that. Yeah. Unless you already feel that like really strong pull towards it. Yeah. You can't just persuade people to do the right thing. They have to want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, reading was something that was always something that I swerved until about, I don't know, coming up a year now. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to sit down. I think I was talking to my wife, and I said, oh, I could go and do this course. I've been accepted to do this degree. I could go and... She's like, well, how much is all that going to cost? So I said, they're about 10 grand. I said, is it going to get you any more work? And I went, well, no, maybe. She just looked at me. She went, you just learn how to fucking read music like the rest of us. Went, all right, okay. So yeah, I spent a good 6 months just reading.
Yeah, you don't need to be like absolutely fluent. You just have to have good comprehension, and it improves everything. Like your understanding of rhythm is like a huge thing when it comes to reading music. People can conceive of rhythmic units in a kind of abstract way, rather than like when we sort of approach playing guitar and improvising, and we've just got this like floating amorphous sense of what rhythm you should play. But just having a kind of conception of rhythm as a visual thing almost helps.
Yeah.
Even when you're improvising or something like that, reading can reprogram your brain to think of things as actual musical units rather than kind of bizarre guitar
explanations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what was it that drew you to guitar over anything else?
So I guess like most people, I was drawn into like a kind of subculture element. So this was around the time that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 came out.
Yeah,
and
I spent many hours on that.
Right. So having played that and like loving the soundtrack, a friend of mine started playing guitar, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And what was kind of weird, I was quite a sportsman as a kid. Really loved playing football in particular. Was fairly good at it, and so did it a lot.
Yeah.
Now I didn't I didn't start puberty as early as some of my footballing contemporaries.
Okay.
And so the game became extremely difficult all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Right? Or I was just unable to compete. So I kind of just fell out of fashion with my footballing peers, just because I was like tiny.
Yeah.
and they were exactly. And so, it's just like completely out of my control. And then when all this started happening, I got into like skating, and I had the advantage of having a musical family with guitars, like Fender Strats and stuff like that, just lying about the place. And my dad worked at a music shop at the time, and is an accomplished guitarist. I just sort of sat down and said, "Hey, Dad, can I get some lessons at school?" And he was like, "Why do you want lessons at school for? I'll show you." And he just basically put down a tab book in front of me and said, "Here's how you decipher this, like the power chords 1, 3, 3, right? Like that kind of." And it's like, okay, and it's like, yeah, that's probably all you need for the music you like for now. Like here's a tab book of like Nirvana, Nevermind, Blink-182, Enema of the State.
Yeah,
and I could I was probably fudging a few moments in it, but I could pretty much play those 2 albums.
Yeah.
And having great fun, wanting to do band stuff. And I just sort of fell in love with it. But what was kind of weird, and maybe a little bit different to most people, is that before playing guitar, I loved Joe Satriani, Eddie Van Halen, Yngwie Malmsteen, just because I grew up listening to that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so I didn't really have like a limiting belief about what could be done. I was like, well, I'll just learn this piece, Satch Boogie. And again, I was probably fudging a little bit, but I gave it a go and I wasn't like intimidated by anything in particular, because I thought, well, all I've got to do is just do what I did in football and try as hard as I could until I did it.
Yeah. Do you think there's an element of that people shy away from learning that kind of stuff because it's kind of scary and it's up tempo and it's very fast? And
yeah, but like the thing I felt was, well, I'll just break it with pure will.
Yeah.
And rather than having like a kind of been told that you have to go one step at a time through a syllabus to develop this and that. So that left a lot of holes in my playing, to be fair.
Okay.
And I was like just immediately kind of interested, not immediately maybe, but like as I progressed, I was like, well, I want to go straight to like playing fast. And again, it's just like, you had all of the sort of more wise older players kind of saying, no, you got to like learn how to feel, and your vibrato is shocking and your timing's terrible, which is all true.
Yeah.
But I think like some of the more wise, let's call them coaches, right? These kind of cultural community coaches. What the wise ones seemed to get was, no, it's the energy and the passion that's important. You'll get the rest.
Yeah.
No one, you'll get the rest at the right time that it occurs to you. And that's how this works in my view, is that you get ready for the lessons you need at the right time.
Yeah.
Rather than someone else trying to curate a pathway for you.
Yeah.
You can be influenced by someone saying, no, you got to listen to this. And like, oh, I hear what you're saying now. It sounds so way better when you do it that way. I'm going to learn that too. But you, again, the actual will to want to do that is coming from your own click moments.
Yeah.
Right. This is like, so in sort of coaching, it's like, hey, if you've got that energy to do something and to like really work on it, don't let anybody tell you to like cool that down or whatever. Just you'll find that on your own. Just encourage the person to stick at it, to do what they're interested in.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know. Do you do any private lessons? Do you teach anymore?
So I experimented over the years with regular like Skype tuition and things like that. I've got a few students that I've sort of clicked with that have been like more sort of long term, and the improvement with them has been like really great. Like so that feels like it's a really good use of both of our time. Sometimes, like with a one-off lesson, you kind of get to the end of it, and I have like a kind of I often end up giving the same lesson to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And that sounds like something's not tailored to what their needs are, but it just turns out that so many people need the same sort of stuff.
Oh, go on. What's the same sort of stuff then?
well, I mean, look, my philosophy is that playing in time is hard enough.
Yeah.
That's my sort of starting point. And in order for us to play in time, we need to have so many other things as subconsciously ready and available without getting in the way of us playing in time.
Yeah.
So in a way, playing in time is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes not being able to play in time comes from a misconception of like technique, bodily use, but it can also just stem from hesitation with fretboard knowledge. And actually, that's, even though it takes a long time, it's actually really easy to develop that, like with a process. So a lot of the time I'm like, well, okay, we just look at those two problems. Let's get you playing in time. And we look at conception of rhythm and getting the hesitations out of our playing. And those are like long-term things. And so what I conceived of for a little while was maybe doing like a kind of longer-term coaching style thing where you keep more in touch with people. Yeah. And that worked better for some people than it did for others. But at the end of the day, it's really about what the student's into. And I think, with all the JTC courses I've done, so I think it's like 15 or 16 different courses now. Those are all kind of providing like the ammunition for some of those long-term processes. So often what ends up happening is I say, well, that's in there. And I've hopefully I've demonstrated to you now the value of going and doing that thing, right? By basically saying, this is what I did. This is what virtually everyone I know who's doing this properly has done. Yeah. Why do you think you need to do it less than we've done? Yeah. So that's like magical thinking, right? So that's my approach. And so almost I go, well, yeah, there you go. The lesson was you need to do what everyone else has done. So go away and do it, and here's some tools for you to do it. And that kind of that ends up being, I would say, relatively successful for the right people. But for other people, so I've had some students for like, a few years where like that's where like the real progress gets made. But again, it's like finding people with the right sort of schedule and, complementary schedules. Like some people can only work in the evening. I can't really do lessons in the evenings. Yeah. And often, international stuff, you can't keeping up regular Skype lessons with people around the world is just a diary meltdown. So I know. It's there's kind of same country privilege.
Yes, I spoke to Brett Garsed, who came on a couple of months ago, and I dropped him a message and I said, "Oh, you cool for doing this?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "When do you want to do it?" I said, "Well, why don't we do it Friday morning?" He said, I don't teach Friday morning. He's like, "Yeah, cool, Friday morning." So Thursday night, I'm sat down in my living room and he pings me a message like, "Are we doing this?" I'm like, "It's Friday morning." He went, No, it's Friday morning now." I'm like, "Oh, fuck, you're in Australia. shit.
Yeah.
So it's like a mad panic. I was like, oh, shit, and I'm yeah. So doing that, and yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. But then he talked about when he tours around Australia, when he toured around the States, you got to navigate time zones. It's like I never have to deal with that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
When I was doing my first album, the second album in progress, Simon Grove was the mix engineer, and he's in Australia. And so it actually worked really well. I would listen to the mix that he would deliver in the morning, get my notes together, send him the notes. He would wake up, and then those would be done during the night, and I'd wake up. Then I'd wake up to more stuff. Okay. If we were in the same country, it would be like, right, end of play, 6:00. You might get the mixes. They're not going to work that evening, so it would only start the next day. So you basically, it was almost like taking half as long to get it done that way, which is kind of weird to think about. That this was like being worked on round the clock. I was also doing a thing with, I Built the Sky.
I don't know that.
I did the string arrangements for an album of his, and the same sort of thing. You can the project can work 24/7 if you've got like a good arrangement with an Antipodean collaborator.
Yeah, that's cool. And so, in your regular everyday life, do you get a chance to practice? Do you do practice? What does practice look like? Has it changed?
So I think my days of peak practice are over for now. But occasionally I get the bug because I do love practicing. I probably like practicing more than actually doing the thing. I just find it very meditative, and I'm sort of addicted to that sort of progress when I start to feel it. But again, I have to be interested in what I'm doing. I don't force it on myself. If I've got something coming up that I need to practice, then I'll sort of do it then. But I do lack a little bit of structure at the moment, but I think that's just generally the case with a lifestyle that requires me to play so much. However, the distinction between practice and performance is not all that clear to me. I've said before on the Guitar Hour podcast that I kind of conceptualize the practice as so you've got like preparing to play, which is working on your musical materials. That could be learning whatever you've got to play for a thing. It could be developing how accurate your time is. It could be working on your improvisation. And then when you actually play creatively in a place, well, you need to get better at doing that. And the only way you get better at doing that is doing that. So that is also a kind of practice, the development of experience in that moment, the kind of self-mastery, becoming aware of your mental state and your sort of bodily habits. Like sometimes you see a guitarist who just sort of contorts themselves into these like really horrible kind of painful positions because somewhere in the back of their psyche is some suggestion that that's what they need to do this, when actually it puts your skeleton in all sorts of the wrong positions.
Oh, there's that voice that says, "Here's the difficult bit."
Yeah. So you stop breathing. Yeah. So So you almost have to like train yourself in you make the diamond in the furnace like that. That's probably a really terrible analogy, but like you learn from the exposure to the opportunity to play. Especially at a high level. I mean, the first West End gig I did, I was very, very nervous. And now I've kind of learned, I've learned how that works, and I get nervous, but I don't get as nervous. So there's just something you just have to do. So you really are always practicing in a sense. You're always trying to develop your, I might not practice in the week. This week, for example, I did a show on Monday, and then I've got 7 shows left for the rest of the week. So there are 8 shows in a week. I might not want to practice that much in between. However, I can observe winning formulas for my mental state in a controlled environment where I'm playing the same thing and go, oh, that was interesting. What did I eat before I played that? Because I felt really alert. Did I have a coffee? You can look into all that sort of thing. You can look into the side of how can I best kind of learn from my own performance practices.
Yeah.
That's a unique situation because you are in a controlled environment. You're not having to sort of change parameters all the time. Go to a gig and it's a different sounding room, and maybe there's some dodgy electricity. Maybe the sound guy is a jerk. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I'm not having to deal with any of that, so I can see certain patterns a little bit more clearly. Which is something we talk about a lot in West End circles. It's like, oh yeah, you don't want to eat just before you play.
Yeah,
you get a bit sluggish. You start to get a bit sleepy. Yeah. It's like, oh, do you guys find that if you have like sushi like half an hour before you play, and maybe not like a coffee right before, but a little bit before, you just kind of alert? Hey, isn't sleep so absolutely crucial to being able to concentrate for long periods of time?
Yeah.
Especially for that second show of the day where you're a bit tired. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, or if you're hungover, you might not be able to do that. But then, hey, did you guys notice that when I did that improvised solo at the end, it was like better than the rest of the show? So some reason I can play creatively when I'm tired, but not play the thing I'm meant to be playing. So you kind of learn all of these like things about yourself. I don't know if that's not like a direct like, I practice alternate picking, I do this, I work on my sound. Of course we do all those things, but there is like we say we play the guitar, but the guitar is just the thing that is being used by us. We actually play ourselves in a way, and we have to really develop a kind of self-knowledge in order to, I think, progress to the level of like to progress to the level of mastery. I know people have practiced so much more, and you just see people out there who are what other people would say is naturals, but for some reason they've got software in their head that doesn't get them phased by things that might phase someone else. And then you talk to them about it, and it's like their ego isn't aligned the same way that someone else's is. And so they find playing a lot easier, or they go for stuff and they just already believe they're going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it, is that self-belief that, I think if you go for something once and you fuck it up, the chance that you're going to go for something again radically diminishes.
Yeah. And
I think you need to sort of train yourself. Think, you know what? I went for it. I fucked it up. I'm going to give it another go.
Absolutely. And just learning that aspect about yourself, and even being like, how do I put this? So if you watch any kind of professional sport, I'll watch the football. I sometimes watch the golf on a Sunday if it's looking interesting, and you have the best players in the world make the same mistakes that I might do.
Yeah.
Because they're, I mean, again, they're so much better, but they make those mistakes because they're under extreme pressure and they're human. They wouldn't make those mistakes just practicing, messing around.
Yeah.
And that's the real, Lionel Messi, arguably one of the greatest footballers ever, is, I wouldn't say arguably, actually, that's probably pretty much confirmed. The kind of mistakes that he'll make over his career amount to way more mistakes than a lot of people, and we see all of them, right? We see every single kind of missed penalty, open goal, missed opportunity, because he puts him we put him in a position to say, go and do it, so we're looking at him making those mistakes. But if Lionel Messi is making those mistakes, why do we expect to be flawless ourselves? It's just crazy. Like there are so many weird, magical thinking things that people get into their heads, and that's not to say that you should go, I made a mistake. Aren't I stupid?
Yeah.
No, that's careless. it's just good to be aware that the mistakes aren't, unless there's a common pattern, the mistakes aren't telling us anything about you, or they might be, and you should be listening to what they are. But often it's just because you're a human being.
Yeah.
And when you get your head straight around what a mistake is, it stops you from compounding that mistake into other mistakes.
Yeah.
And you come out, you basically make the same amount of errors, but you come out from work feeling a lot better.
Yeah.
Like you don't feel like, oh,
that was a slug, that one.
Yeah, exactly. You just go, oh shit, today wasn't I?
Yeah, did you hear that?
I'll be better tomorrow because I've done this loads and loads of times, and I just had a bad day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is. I think you need to give you need to give yourself a break with things like that. I remember, I think it was Tim Pierce said when everybody's on a show, he looks forward to the first mistake. It's like, there it is. There's the first mistake.
There it is.
Get on with the rest of the show.
Yeah.
And I mean, compounding mistakes just comes from that fear of, the mistake that you make is the worst thing that you can do. And I think that's all. I don't know if that's through the school system or through education, but like the mistake is the worst thing you can do at school.
Well, yeah, I think in my limited experience, I grew up in a culture that because I love playing football so much as a kid. I played lots of it, and I played it in some quite competitive environments.
Yeah.
Like sort of like academy level.
Okay.
And the message drummed into me that whole time was, hey, it doesn't matter if you have a bad game, just give it 110%. Give it 110%. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that kind of translates to look like you're giving 110%. Right. And so that's like, that's a kind of tension that's like, gritting your teeth and going for it. Yeah. It's not a very Zen approach to that whole thing, and it doesn't really work in music. But I'd onboarded that, and I was like, well, I have to look like I'm trying, really go for it. It's a terrible lesson. I had to deprogram myself basically. It's not good to be careless, but it's definitely good to care less. Yeah, and you're going to, again, I said it before, but you're going to make mistakes. That is inevitable. Maybe not noticeable mistakes, which I call like fluffs. Yeah. If I get for a show with a couple of fluffs, I'm pretty happy. Some days I'm just on, and I'm like, I'll say to a friend like, hey, you don't hear this from me very often. Maybe in like the 5 years we've known each other, like I'll say to them, but I was great today, and I don't know why. I could have been like, if someone was sitting there watching that, they would have gone, this guitar player's a great guitar player. Yeah. And that's like such a rare event, but it happens. Yeah. And you kind of live for those moments, right? Yeah. Just across the board, a brilliant performance. And that's maybe like happened like once in that period. So I most of the time I go, yeah, it's okay. There was a couple of things, again, when I say mistakes, I'm really not saying like, I'm not talking about like bad wrong notes or just sometimes like you just didn't nail something. Yeah. I just want to be sort of like, sometimes you do make like bigger errors, but those are rare. Those are really rare, and they sometimes stem from stuff that's not really your fault, like something going a bit weird up on stage or something like that. But yeah, just learning how to get rid of that kind of sportsman like attitude and sort of get a little bit more zen, if you like, about what this is, and try to average out my approach to this game, because realistically, I put myself into situations where, I might be absolutely exhausted from doing 2 shows and going out afterwards for a few beers, and get a text in the morning saying, can you do a matinee today? Mm-hmm. And then going in doing the matinee, well, I'm not going to be 100%, but I need the money. I've done the job. Yeah. Now, I think a younger me would have been going in, doing a bad job, and going, why did I do a bad job? I'm better than that. Again, when I say bad job, that no one was unhappy with me. I was unhappy with myself. Yeah. But I think now I just go, okay, I'm expecting a 70% capacity performance, but I'm doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and my 70% performance might be better than someone else's 90% performance.
Yeah.
And you have to have the humility to remember that you're a dep, and when you're a dep, you're playing with in a way with a handicap. You know, you're not really sort of able to do it at 100% capacity.
Yeah.
And you learn the humility to know what that feels like playing on other people's instruments. And I guess it all comes down to you are not your guitar playing, and the more you can divorce your ego from that,
Mm-hmm.
the better you are going to be at keeping your brain and body in the sort of correct alignment for actual performance.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me to exist in a world where I was doing, you know, basically crazy amounts of work to discover that.
Yeah.
You know, sort of working. You know, just for example, maybe this is like quite at the high, number, but for the since last Monday to the end of the month, so till Sunday. So from Monday the 17th till the 30th, I will have done 18 shows in 14 days.
Wow.
So that's a lot of guitar playing, a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you really just learn. You learn about yourself in that kind of environment because you have more data than most people.
Yeah.
Most people are very much in the wishful thinking frame of mind about how they should be performing, or how much they need to practice. And I kind of equate it to, if you've got someone who's a bit tubby and has, like, you know, they might struggle with their diet, they might and they might go to the gym and they'll go on the treadmill for like 15 minutes and then they'll do, so they're doing what they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
which is good. So that's a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Right, they're doing what they can. The only thing is that if you go to the gym and you see people in really good shape, they're doing twice as much work as the person who's just starting.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, the problem is talk about getting better. Like, I'm probably doing way more of that work than someone who's working on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's and talking to, you know, some of my close friends in the industry, like people like Tom Quayle,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you really look at it closely, he's probably doing more practice, like more meaningful, good practice, than a lot of students are. So that's the thing, and that's what I learned really when I went to Berklee. That was like the biggest lesson, that the better people were out practicing the less good people when they were already better.
Yeah.
That's not to say that someone was not, you know, like I said, that person just starting their thing, doing something that was manageable and sustainable, that is good. But we have to realize that if we want to be competing at that level, you are not going to catch up just doing that. Yeah. You really won't. And it's that whole thing of that guy or girl at the gym who's already in absolutely shredded shape, just to maintain that figure, is doing way more work than you are to get to some level of mediocrity. Yeah. And that's not like a judgment that you shouldn't be doing anything.
Yeah. No.
You know, there's a lot wrapped up in that analogy that's like potentially toxic or judgmental. That's not the intention of the metaphor. Yeah. The intention of the metaphor is to say that you know, you don't practice up to a point where you go, now I can take the foot off the gas.
Yeah.
It's just actually like, you have to fall in love with practicing, just like people have to fall in love with going to the gym. Your goal can't be the North Star. The North Star has to be the process of doing the thing, and expect to put a lot of hours in if you want to compete, and you have to compete if you want to work.
Yeah. And so on the subject of getting better, I mean, what does getting better look like to you today, and how's it changed over the years, or if it has changed over the years?
So I think getting better, in my view, is to do with, I would say, like, kind of metrics, if you like, like a top trumps thing.
Yeah.
And in some ways, though, for me, it's how can I get better at doing my job? In some ways, it's how can I get better at making more interesting things? In some ways, it's how can I get better at improvising?
Yeah.
But kind of strangely, I don't get that much opportunity to actually have an outlet for a lot of this stuff just because of the way the world is. I can't control any of that. So often it's how can I get better as a person? Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it sounds like a bit of a cop out, but often so much of our issues stem from sometimes personal failings we can't really do anything about, and sometimes they are quirks that actually could be assets. Should you just be aware that that's something you are like. And there's not like one size fits all for everyone. To me, we get better through getting to really sort of know ourselves and our tendencies. And I used to listen to like Herbie Hancock say stuff like that and think, no, that's a cop out.
Yeah.
It's scales, isn't it, Herbie?
Yeah.
It's like, but again, like for me, I like the feeling, I guess, of recording, like logging some sort of metric outcome. Right, so if I know that about myself, right, like for example, let's just take it outside the realm of guitar playing, and I'm a keen but rubbish golfer, and I can look at a metric like, okay, there is a very very clear metric of how far I'm hitting the ball with any of the clubs, and I can work on upping that metric until I'm not interested in that metric anymore. I'm looking at how closely can I group my my strikes so that I'm able to score better. So I will work on that metric. And in guitar, it could be speed, accuracy. It could be phrasing, vocabulary, rhythm. And the thing is that the metrics aren't quite as clear because we're in sort of an artistic realm. What you can do, though, is record yourself playing and do it every day, and then go back in 2 weeks and see if you've made progress. And often the progress is so glacially slow that you don't notice it happening. That's why you need to, gather evidence and see, is my process working?
Yeah.
And obviously this is, how do you get better? I would say by being really wanting to get better would be the first step. And so many times people don't actually want to get better. They just want, they just have this kind of feeling of, well, I should just do this and I'll be better and yada yada, or better at what. But just having the will in the first place. When I did this book on practice, which came out of a JTC course, but I ended up writing like such a long PDF on it. We converted it into a book with the help of Guitar Vivo. So much of that thinking, it was almost a little bit self-helpy, but only because if you're really being honest about all that stuff, I do go into specifics about each individual sort of aspect of playing and what you can do to work on it. But in the sort of small print behind all of that is that you won't do it unless you really want to do it. So how can you motivate yourself to want to do it? And sometimes people are, you could take a random sample set of 10 people, and one person's had the ridiculously lucky childhood upbringing where they're kind of mentally stable, have like a quite healthy routine anyway, and has all sorts of other like mental habits and processes and curiosity that lends itself to like going straight there. And some people can be a complete emotional wreck, but is so passionate about doing something that they might get in the way of themselves with substance abuse, but they never stop. They like get their teeth into something and they never stop. So everyone's like completely different, but if you know which version of yourself you are on any given day, you can at least lean into that and go, well, I know I'm kind of the kind of person who needs a lot of structure, or I know the sort of person who needs a lot of creativity, or I need to put it into something, or you might even say, look, I don't want to become a more technically gifted guitar player. I want to make more music and get better at that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go, whoa. No, you got to work on your tone picking, because otherwise you'll know your dream will never happen. You'll never get this or that. And then all of a sudden they're writing amazing songs, playing acoustic guitar better than, a shredder could for what they're trying to do. So in terms of like domain specific areas, the way to get better is develop a strategy that fits both how you are as a person, but also just be smart and get like good advice from people who have done it themselves and can coach you along a little bit. And I think a lot of the stories you hear about outliers, you do have this kind of ridiculously lucky circumstance where they're just exposed to the right people with the right attitudes. They get the right nugget at the right time. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not all going to be outliers, right? That's just not how it works. Yeah. So what can we reasonably expect? What's our real goal? Is it to play a better solo down the pub gig? And if that's what you want to do, then fantastic. If that's really what you want, then great. But if someone was to come to me and say, I want a career as a professional musician, that's really exciting to hear, because it says that they are willing to do a lot of work, to take risks and so on. And in a way, you've got to be responsible, because it might not be for everyone. But in a way, it's exciting for anyone to say that, as long as they know what they need to do to achieve that.
Yeah.
And again, I think sometimes people need their expectations managed in a polite and respectful way. But then also, it's like, well, show me, go for it, and like, just know that you've got a lot to catch up on. And if you can do that, then wow, you definitely should be here, and you definitely should be doing it, because that's amazing. So it's really a kind of balancing act, I guess. Yeah.
Do you tend to these days, do you like to lean into your strengths, or do you work on your weaknesses?
I suppose I do. I try to categorize my weaknesses into things that I feel like I triage what my weaknesses are in order to say, okay, well, this weakness is holding me back. Yeah. But there are so many weaknesses that I have, and I think we all have probably infinite weaknesses that we need to know which ones of those are salient to work on for whatever our goal is. Yeah. And that depends to some degree on how specialized do you want to be. Specialization in different domains can be risky, or it can be the only safe play. Yeah. Right. I think I heard maybe, I think it was Jimmy Carr talk about this. You kind of have to give those like outlying. How many comedians get that successful, right? You kind of have to give it everything. Yeah. Right. And because your competition is giving it everything, not giving it in everything, and then sort of doing that thing where you're playing around a bit around the sides and seeing what sticks is not going to get you to Jimmy Carr. Yeah. Quite possibly. That, again, there are exceptions, and there is no one size fits all thing. But I think the lesson there is you will never stand out against someone who is putting 100% of their effort into specializing. Yeah. So I will never, ever be able to hang with people who are 100% jazz guitarists. Right. I know that. I'm not going to spend my life specializing in a place where I'm not that interested, and they are. Yeah. So you have to know whether you're like a generalist or a specialist. Yeah. But weirdly, strange specializations come out through hybridizing general skills. Yeah. And so you go, well, there might be lots of guitar players who are good sort of shredders. Some of those shredders can play fusion to a level. Mm-hmm. Some of those shredders have the ability to read. Some of those shredders are good rhythm guitar players.
Yeah.
Some of those shredders can get through a good acoustic number. And then all of a sudden the pool starts to close, and you go, okay, well, you're suited to that. You're suited to that sort of job. So it's not like a complete jack of all trades, but you sort of start to see your sort of niche developing from what you're already doing.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, I kind of, I have like a PhD in composition. So I'm like, well, my niche is kind of being able to do all that stuff, being musically literate, being able to develop projects, right? And deliver on projects. There are so many people who can't finish projects.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm both that person and not that person at the same time. Yeah, it's like if you look backwards, I'm someone who can finish projects. If you look forwards, it's much more scary.
A wreckage of unfinished assignments. I get that.
So I guess you're going to work on what is pulling you forwards anyway. I wouldn't actually make such a clear distinction as working on your strengths and working on your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Again, because it applies differently to specialists and outliers and generalists in different measures. It might be so everything we do is an opportunity cost to something we don't do. So if I spend like 2 weeks working on bluegrass, that will be 2 weeks I haven't spent working on something that might actually be salient to my And I think most people should be just working on fundamentals way more than they do. So working on your rhythm and time feel, and your fluency around the fretboard.
Yeah.
And those things will be evergreen to work on. And everyone can benefit from those. And then for the rest of it, it's up to you. I just don't think that I don't think that distinction is that helpful to people trying to become professionals, because not many people are going to become outliers. And I think this conversation was developed really with Steve Vai, making the point that he doesn't work on his weaknesses. Why would he do that? Yeah. It's like, well, you're the outlier. It's not, and he might argue, well, you don't get that unless you're a bit like that. It's like, well, that's cool. We've got one of you.
Yeah.
And we'll have other people who are a bit like that. But, circumstances change. We need to put food on the table. We need to not be irresponsible with our advice.
Yeah.
It's.
I mean, it's always. I mean, I think you nailed it when you said that. You can work on weaknesses that are going to benefit you. So I'm not a strong reader, but I work on it. But I'm a shit flamenco guitar player, and I'm not going to be working on it because I've yet to get a flamenco gig. And if I do, if someone says, "Hey, quick, you've got to do a flamenco thing," I know one little thing. And
there's a
the
great
thing that everyone does. It's the E major, shift it up a
yeah,
semitone.
yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Have you seen that?
That's my flamenco.
Have you seen that Tedesco video where he talks about doing sessions in LA on like film scores and stuff?
Yes, yeah.
And he's like, so do something Spanish, and he plays the sort of the flamenco E Phrygian type thing. And then he goes, I'll play something like Arabian. And he does the same thing. Yeah. and it's like something Egyptian. And he does like something very similar.
Yeah.
It's that. Again, we kind of the jobbing approach is to kind of just cover something, have it covered to a level where you're we often, like, for example, you go, okay, what's this gig then? Yes, it's mostly guitar, but you need to play a little bit of organ and a bit of banjo. And you go, well, if it's mostly guitar, I can do that.
Yeah.
But you go, yeah, it's mostly an organ gig with a bit of guitar, and there's a big banjo moment that has to be absolutely tuned as per a banjo. That's not my gig.
Yeah, I'll pass that on.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, that's not for me. So it really depends on, on what's really on offer, really.
Yeah. Well, mate, I think we're going to leave it there.
Cool.
It was so lovely to chat to you. It was nice to hook up and connect. And I appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.